Okay, so this is the code that we've written so far, and you can see our test cases here on the left hand side that are all currently passing. So we can see here we've got our duplication within the verse method, and now I think we're at the point where we have enough information and enough duplication really to start refactoring this. And the way that we were taught to do this in Sandy's class was basically to look for the lines of code, the two lines of code with the smallest differences, and then try and make them more alike. So looking at this, these different cases here, you can see that the final two cases, the 98 case and the 99 case, are pretty similar. And I would say that the first line in each are probably the two lines of code that are most alike, but have some small differences. And now you can see the only difference really there at the start is that the numbers are actually different in the string. So here in refactoring this, we wouldn't want to extract this variable, for example, which is shared in both. That wouldn't help us really resolve the duplication that exists. So what I mentioned earlier is that we want to take those differences, so take the differences here in the numbers and then make the two cases the same. So the way we can do that for these two lines is, because we're actually passing in the number to this method, we already have access to that number there. So we can actually use Ruby's string interpolation syntax here and just change that hard-coded 98 string to use the variable num. So that'll get outputted as a string. So when it reaches this case, the num will be 98, so 98 will be outputted there. So we can do that, we can change that and just run the tests just to make sure nothing's broken, and that's fine, they're still passing. And then in making these two lines the same, we can also just do the same there. Just plug that variable in and run the tests. We can see that this is the 99 case. So now look what we've done to these first two lines here, this line and this line here. We've actually made them exactly the same. We've taken that difference and made them exactly the same. So that's exactly what we're looking for here. And then if we carry on in these lines, you can see that again we're repeating basically the use of the number. And we can just go ahead and do the same thing again. Use the number variable in there, and also the same here again, and run the tests, see they're still passing. And you can see again we've made the second part of this sentence now exactly the same on both lines. So now this full line and this full line here are exactly the same, and we can go ahead and find the next two lines then with the smallest differences. So if we carry on looking at these two cases and we look at the second lines in each of them here, take one down and pass it around, we can see that the start of these sentences are exactly the same. And again, in the second part, we're just using the number, but it's actually the number -1, which is the number of bottles remaining on the wall. So what we can do here is again use the number, but just take away 1, and that should return 97 there, which we can verify just by running the tests. And we can do the exact same thing here, number -1. Run the tests, and we're still green. And what we've done here now is remove that duplication by finding those small differences. We've made these two cases, the 98 case and the 99 case, exactly the same. So what that allows us to do now is say that basically for the base case, so for else, we should return this, and we don't actually need this final case then. So this else case will represent the 98 and the 99 and also any other numbers that don't fall into the cases above. So that's great. We've just removed one case from our verse method, and we can move on then to looking at the next smallest difference, which probably this one here is a good candidate. So you will probably notice that in fact the structure of this case is exactly the same as the previous to the 98 and the 99. So what we can do is just following small steps is just again remove this number, put the num in there, run the tests, we're still passing. Do the same here, put the num there, and again we have the number there, -1, and run the tests. You can see we're passing all the way through, and this was sort of the approach that Sandy and Katrina Owen recommended, to really take small steps. Basically, you could argue that we could have just deleted this case straight away and it would have fallen through into this case and continued to pass, but we're just following the technique so that in situations where you can't really see this clearly how similar the cases are, by just following the small approach, the baby step approach of doing it bit by bit, we're more confident at the time when we do come to delete case and remove that duplication. So we can see now by plugging those variables in there, this case and the else case look to be exactly the same. So we can actually go ahead and remove that case now, which is great. And you can already start to see now we've removed 2 cases and we're just left with our base case here. And we can continue looking for the next 2 lines of code that have the smallest difference. So looking at this line here, the second line, we could probably do the same again here, just use number -1. So 2 is passed in there, 2 minus 1 is 1, so that'll give us 1 bottle of beer on the wall, and we're still passing. And again, looking at the first sentence and this sentence here, you can see they're pretty identical, and we can use the number variable there as well. Okay. And again, we can actually go ahead and remove that test, and we should be able to. Okay, no. Just Control Z, save. And that's kind of a demonstration really of the Katrina Owen technique of just by taking these small steps and being only a Control Z away from green, we're straight back to where we were, and we can see why removing that didn't work. So just going to analyze the 2 lines here, and yeah, you can see that on this second line here, we've actually got bottle and bottles. So that's why the test failed there. And now we can look at, this is probably the next smallest difference, these 2 words here. So we can look at thinking about how to extract this basically and make these 2 lines the same. So from my memory of the class with Sandy, she wanted us to think about the concept of bottles in a slightly more abstract way. So rather than referring to them explicitly as bottles, we actually defined a container method and pass in the number. And the idea of this container method really is to return whether there's bottle or bottles, so the pluralization of it. So by defining this container method and passing in a number, we can say that if we only have, let me do a case number, so when we have one bottle, the container is just a bottle, otherwise it's bottles. So this is just a nice method to handle this case of pluralization there. And we can just, following the Katrina step, I've just seen if that code compiles, if there's any errors in that. I mean, it's fairly simple, but we can just double check it. There's no compile errors, so we can start looking to use that method in our code here. So I can then again use Ruby's interpolation, use the method that we've just defined and pass in the number, but it'll actually be the number -1 because we are using one bottle here. And if I run those tests, we should expect that this here evaluates the bottle, and then that should keep the test passing, which it does. And the thing is, now we can do the exact same thing in the last line of the base case. Just pass in number -1 there, and tests are passing. So that's good there. We found that, you know, there was an extra piece that we needed to take care of, and we've just defined a new method to handle that. And what that's allowed us to do is actually remove this duplication here. So now we can get rid of that case, and the tests should still be passing, which they are. So we've got an extra method here, and this base case now handles that pluralization of the container. So looking ahead then to the next smallest difference, we can see here we're using 1. We've seen already now that we can just, you know, replace that with num, and exactly the same there, and run those tests. We're still passing, and now we can see again here that we have some more pluralization issues. So again, we can use our container method here and pass in the number, and this should evaluate to bottle, so it will be 1 bottle of beer on the wall, just using our method that we've already defined, and that passes. And now that should let us handle this case here as well. Just remember, we're trying to make these lines, this line here and this line, the same, so we can again use the same method, pass in the number there and run that, and you can see now that the first part of these cases are exactly the same, which is what we want. And again, here we have the same situation where we are dealing with the pluralization of the container. So we can again call container with num, run the tests, and here container, pass in the number, run the tests, and we're still passing. So we're looking pretty good now on the first line here, and this first line we're using the exact same structure, the same method called container, just the number is different every time, and that difference then is handled in the container. It's abstracted away from our code, and we can move on then probably to the second line in each of these cases here. So looking first of all, we can see there's a difference here in the pronoun that's used to handle the bottle that's being removed from the wall. So in the case where there's 1, we're just taking it down, but in the case where there's more than 1, we're just taking 1 down. So this looks like another case where we can add a method to handle this in the interest of making these two lines the same. So we can probably use some kind of pronoun method, pass in the number, and the idea behind this method is just to return it or one, depending on what the number is. So in the case of the number, when it is 1, we want to return it, else we just want to take 1 down and end, and then we can run that in the test just to see if it compiles. There's no errors in that, and we can then start plugging our method in here and here just to start making these lines the same. So we'll use the pronoun method and pass in the number. Need to make sure we're interpolating that, and run the tests. We're still passing. We can remove 1 there and pass in the number, and we're still passing. So you can see here now we've made the first part of the second line exactly the same, which is perfect, and then we are looking at the last part of this here. So in the base case, we're returning number -1 and then the container number -1 of beer on the wall, and here we're returning no more and bottles. So I think it's looking like this here. No more and number are actually equivalent, because this is actually representing 0, but because it's no more, that means we can't actually use the number variable itself. So this probably suggests that we need some kind of method to check on this, to check on the number. So we could start to do that. We could go ahead and define another method to check the quantity, and we would need to pass the number to that as well. And in the case of the number, so we want to handle our 0 case. So when it's 0, we want to return no more. Else, we just want to return the number, and that will then work the same way as it is now in these cases here. We'll just return that number if it's not 0. So if we go ahead and maybe run the test first just to see that compiles, it's fine, and then we can look to use that method here. So if I replace that with quantity and pass in the number, that should there return. Actually, it'll need to be number -1, because at this point it's 1, and then we've taken it down, and we need to pass 0 into that quantity, and that passes. Okay. So now we've started to use another method here, and if we are going to combine these cases ultimately to remove that duplication, we need to start using that quantity method elsewhere as well. So we probably need to use that in this final line here as well, so we can get this one and this one matching up. It's just missing a T there. So if I run that, that still passes as well, which is what we wanted. And then probably in the interest of consistency, we might want to replace these as well, these number variables by themselves, and start to use the quantity method for those as well. Send it here again. this passing. So we can put that there. We're also going to put that there. Okay, and here as well. And again, we're just taking small steps just to make sure that we are putting them in the right place. And okay, now we've replaced the use of num with the method quantity and passing in the num into that method. So we're now actually returning the correct string. And what that's done now is allow us to make these top lines here and here the same. And also now we are almost in the position where the second lines in these cases are the same. So again, we have a pluralization issue here, which we should be able to solve by passing the number -1 to our container. So that should meet our else case, because that will be 0 at this point. So that should fall under the else case. So we can replace that with container, and then number -1, and run those tests. And we're still passing. And now I think we have actually made each of these cases, again by looking at the smallest differences, we've made them the same. So we should be able to just get rid of that case now. And run the tests. And everything's okay. So we've actually got down now to just 2 cases. And we can continue the process of abstraction, basically. So again, at the start here, we've got the quantity number call, but in the 0 case, we've got no more. So we should again be able to use our quantity method. The only difference, I think, is that there's actually a capital N there, and we've got a lowercase there, because the lowercase n is required in the rest of the song. So there is one way we could get around this, is to actually use the uppercase version here, and then when we use the quantity method in other places where a lowercase is required, for example here, we can use the downcase method, and again here. So that will just mean that we should continue to return this in those other later parts of the sentence. So I keep that as capital and then run those tests. Okay, so I think the problem here is that we're trying to call downcase on a number. So in the case that it's 0, we're calling downcase on the string, no more. But if it's actually a number, that's going to throw an error, because there is no method on a fixed number. So I think we can just actually, if we interpolate that the same way that we were originally, so just make that string so that the number is outputted into a string when it's returned from quantity, then calling the downcase method on that should just have no effect, but it shouldn't error, I think. That's okay. So we found a way to get around that. And okay, now that means, yeah, that at the start of the sentence, we've been able to use quantity number there, and also now that allows us to actually use the method here as well. So we're going to return the capitalized version, no more, and we're not going to call downcase on it. So they're exactly the same there. Look at these calls to quantity. And run those tests, and we're passing. And so again, we've got a difference here. We've got a call to container, passing the number, and here we're using bottles. So we should again be able to use our same method container there. and pass in the number. So in this case it would be 0. 0 passed to this would return bottles, and if we just Control Z, that's exactly what we want it to be, bottles. So that should be passing, which it is, and we've made the first part of this sentence and this sentence exactly the same, just by finding those differences. And again, now we've got no more here, and we should be able to use this exact same method here, calling the quantity method and return the downcased version of that. And you can run those tests. It's the green, and then again we've got a pluralization difference, and we've seen that solved before with our container method. So we can go ahead and use that again and run those tests for passing. And now what we've actually done is made the first line of each of these cases exactly the same, by making a few changes to our quantity method there and adding the downcasing. So that's allowed us to continue to abstract basically the differences, and then we can move on to the second lines in each of these cases. So we've got a pretty different action there that we do after we've sung the first line of the song. So potentially what we could do is define another method just that refers to that action and takes the number again. And in the case of the number, when we have 0 bottles, we want to go to the store and buy some more. So we should be able to add that to our action. So we'll just return that string when it's 0. Else, we always want to take the pronoun down and pass it around. And that should allow, this method here then should allow us to remove that differences there between these two sets of lines. So if we, well, first of all, let's run the test just to see if that compiles, and then go ahead and use our new action method and pass in the number. And that's passing. And we can do the same thing then to make these lines the same. We can take away this and call the action method, pass in the number, run the tests, and that's great, we're still green. So we're almost there. We just have the last part then of the songs. So we want to make these the same again. Now, the number, we've seen that we should be able to just use our quantity method. So let's think about that first here, that if we here we've been using the quantity method with number -1. So in this case here, number -1, 0 minus 1 is -1. So if we pass -1 to the quantity method, that will just return the number, which will be -1. So that's not what we want there. So if we want to match this part here and this method call that we already have, we probably need to have another case where we are handling -1, because we're now going to be passing -1 into the quantity method. I'm going to add it here. So in that case, we probably just want to return 99, I think. and that should allow us to put the quantity in there in exactly the same way that we've done in the base case. And see, now we're going to call the quantity method with number minus 1, which is 0 minus 1, which is minus 1, pass into here, minus 1 is 99, and then I'll call the downcase method, which will do nothing. So that allows us to still use this method that we've been using down here. We've just added another specific case to the quantity, and now that has made our, almost all of this sentence the same. And we can just look at the bottles here, the pluralization. So in order to make this and this the same, we should just use the same method again and run the tests, and we're still passing. So we're using the container method, passing in minus 1, and that falls under the else case, so it just returns bottles. And you can see now, I think, that both of these cases are exactly the same. And finally, after our process of finding those smallest differences, we're able to extract the pieces of information that we wanted to pull into other methods into new sections here. We've got a container method, a pronoun method, quantity method, and an action method. And that now allows us to remove the base case and the first case and just return one single string that is built up depending on the values of the number. And if we run the tests, we can see we're still passing. So that's basically a quick overview, really, of the technique that Sandy showed us in class, which is, as I've repeated throughout, is just find the small differences and then think about how you can make two of those lines of code more similar. And you want to do that by adding some new methods, passing in a small amount of variables, hopefully, and then just doing some basic checking on that. And what we've done then is taken our duplicated code, refactored it into a nicer sort of abstraction and more methods, and this then allows us to take the code further onto our next stage, which is to actually take these methods and refactor them further into separate classes, so you can gain further abstraction from this by following this step-by-step process. But I'll leave that for another blog post to explain. So I hope that was useful, and thank you for watching.